Again, thank you for joining us. We're going to put in some work in the next hour to build a resource and answer some very top-minded questions that some of us have had around how to best structure critique and build community as we move into the fall time period. I am Rebecca Tegtmeyer, and I'm here in Plymouth, Michigan. I'm at Michigan State University, associate professor here, and I have to make a note, one of my undergrad professors is in the crowd, circa 90s, so I instantly got nervous, even more nervous. That relationship never ends, right? So thanks for being here. Now moving on to the rest of my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Walters. My pronouns are she, her. I am also a DEC steering committee member. I'm very excited to be here. I see lots of faces that I know kind of in the grids, and like clicking through is kind of exciting. I am an assistant professor of communication design at Parsons School of Design. And like I said, I'm really excited to sort of dig into some of the questions that we have today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Mercer. I'm an assistant professor in graphic design at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I work with our undergraduate program, but I also teach in our graduate program, which is recently renamed to Design for Responsible Innovation. And also my pronouns are she, her.
Hello, everybody. My name is Khadija, for those that can't say Kha. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the creative and design lead at Recoded. Recoded helps youth in war-torn countries or under countries that are not that digitally equipped with the skills for the future of work to give them those skills. So I'm based in Erbil, Iraq. I'm in northern Iraq. I also have a branding studio that's completely female-led, and I'm in the middle of a rebrand. Aren't we all? So if you go to yakhadija.com, you won't find anything. My other design studio is Khadija Designs. And I will segue into our community agreements and how we're gonna run show today. So please make sure to use your voice and speak up and step back and make space for others. And let's make sure to create a safe space for others to share their thoughts. Also, please honor time and keep that in mind, that you are sharing time and space with everyone as well as your ideas. You will be paired into, well, not paired, but put into groups of at least 7. There will be 20 groups. Please make sure to decide which one of you will be a note taker in that group. Yes, you all will have to kind of divvy up roles pretty quickly. You will be given a link for the slide deck. Make sure when you are in the breakout room to look up into the breakout room, and on the top it will indicate what group number you're in, and you will then use a corresponding slide to input your notes and to put in your names in the speaker notes bar down below so that you have enough room to write your notes. Please make sure that you answer questions 1 to 4 for the first breakout session. And now I'm going to introduce you to an awkward silence as we break people out.
Well, before we break,
okay.
I just want to maybe flag the questions and just sort of share out a little bit of like how that will sort of help solidify what we're doing as well. We have another Google document, which I think we can put into the chat room here. Oh, great, Lisa put it in. And inside the document, if Rebecca, I think if you're sharing the screen, if you want to pull that one up. And inside of the document here, what we've built out are a series of questions. They respond to a couple of different key topic areas. They're starters for discussion. So I think that as you break out into your individual groups, you'll be able to see a bit more clarity what each question bucket is actually looking at. But in the way that Khadija just mentioned, we have 2 breakout rounds The first round, we're really looking at questions 1 through 4. And so in the entirety, if you look through the Google document, you'll be able to see all of the questions at large. So if you're thinking ahead and wanting to sort of take a look at how those are sort of operating as well, we are excited about just having that be visible to you all. And at the tail end, there's some resources and examples of things that we're beginning as well to kind of build out. And we encourage any resources or examples that you're finding to include those there as well. So it's a living document. And I think now we can go to another awkward silent pause as we transition into the groups. Perfect. I think we can, I'm sure in all of these group conversations, it got quickly into the weeds, and I'm excited to keep going as we break out one more time into our second discussion, the last set of questions.
Okay, it looks like we've got everybody's back in here. Well, thank you so much for your input. I just want to point out we started with 7 slides and now it has grown to 51 slides.
Wow.
So we will work to shift through the information and put it into a more digestible format and share back out on the Slack channel. That might take a form of an extensive PDF with everything that we've collected here. So I think this is so great. I jumped around from through a lot of breakout sessions, and there's 3 things that I just wanted to share back out to the big group of some takeaways I saw. But I think one thing to take note of is to recognize where we all sit within our institutions and department, and think about the other type of crit experiences our students might be having. I know, for example, I'm in a department with studio art. So I know my students are participating in painting critiques and ceramic critiques, and how that experience might be very different for them when they come into my classroom in a design crit. So recognizing that, even if we're in a institution with architecture, landscape architecture, those different formats. One thing I did hear that I took a note on is, I don't remember what breakout room or who said it, but someone just said that they don't do any full class crits because we all know the complications that come with doing that and always running out of time. So they just don't do that.
Wait, don't do what?
Don't do full class crits.
Oh, full class.
Because
crits,
you know,
okay.
we always run out of time, and
Yeah.
some people get more time at the front end and the back
Yeah.
end, and we always just run out of time. So just eliminating that from the options of critique.
But what do? Do they
Yeah.
divide it up so the next time they have class, the other half of the class gets a critique?
I didn't stick around to listen to this.
I never do class critiques. I always do small round robin group critiques. So you might not get to everybody, but everybody got their feedback.
I actually put them in small groups and they get to own that moment. And I organize crits every week. And so it becomes really easy to swallow for everybody, and they're usually just very short crits. We have objectives and we have points to discuss, and it's like, okay, we have these 4 points to critique, let's go through them and give each other feedback. I'm not gonna chip in necessarily there. And then as the crits go one after the other, I actually have one-on-ones with students, and that's also really helpful for them. But I also don't do full class critiques because it's just draining for everybody, and I feel like it's a waste of time. But I do use the full class time to talk about patterns that I've noticed of people, you know, talking and just like hearing this conversation and that conversation and how we can solve problems together like this.
Do you find that when you do that, that you have students who are eager to also get your feedback? So if you put them into small groups and you say, okay, go, now we're done at whatever time, are they coming back to you saying, but I want your opinion, I want your opinion now, like,
Of course.
It happens, and that's why I always leave one-on-ones moments. I would rather have every student own that moment. And really, I think it's important to share from the very beginning what you're expecting from a crit, and repeat these objectives in every single crit, so that they also, own that moment. It's their voice that counts, and it's not necessarily just mine. And I find that discussing the patterns is enough for them to not come back to me all the time. And I'm more as the big picture.
Yeah, how does that fit into the final grade of a project?
Yeah, good question.
Well, the way I grade is, did you reach the objectives of this assignment or you didn't? And basically I have a very clear rubric, and that's about it. I'm not a big fan of grading, because I think that once you graduate, nobody cares about you having A's or B's or C's, but it's more about, did you reach the objectives?
I think I'll jump in there too, just as it connects back to grading and thinking about rubrics and self-assessment. I think something that I do a lot is, and I think our group, one of the groups I was in, we talked a little bit about building vocabulary language that supports the students knowing how to critique in the first place, and having that language also tied to a rubric perhaps, or the ways in which they might be graded later. So it's kind of like scaffolding in my kind of view, and things that I've tried, kind of allowing for the vocabulary and what they might be assessed on, having them start to use it more often, but also that's something that they might be critiqued on later. And then having that tied to perhaps like a self-assessment that they do on themselves, and also an assessment that I might do as well, so that together the two are kind of in dialogue. It's kind of, I think for them, they can reflect on whether they gave feedback to another peer, or they aren't clear perhaps in the work that they've created. So I think kind of the mixture of like assessment meets critique meets dialogue, I think they're all sort of interconnected.
I think a big part of that also is, and I think Rick Griffith was talking about this earlier today, and I'm really glad, Rick, that you brought up autoethnography and the importance of storytelling. I think part of it too is students sometimes need to be reminded that as you enter this profession, you're not going to be in a room full of other people, at least an awful lot, who've also been to design school. So how effective are you going to be at telling the story about why you made the decisions that you made, and your ability to give each other? It's not coming from me, it's not coming from Michael. It's how effective are you able to give each other the kind of critical commentary. And so a lot of times, one of the things that I stress, and I grade on this, is how effective are the questions? How well framed are the questions that you've asked your peers? And I use small groups all the time as well.
I think that's one of the things that I do in my classes as well, with like language and the groups. So like in the groups, I actually assign a group leader. So I just pick a student to start off in the groups, and they lead the critique for that group. And then whoever just got critiqued, they become the leader for the next critique. So you have like 5 students critiquing one project, and the person who just got critiqued becomes the leader, and they all have this ability to, everybody gets a chance to speak, everybody gets a chance to lead and be responsible. And if there's any time left and they're like, well, I kind of feel like we're done, they're the one responsible for continuing that conversation and making ownership over that. And so I find I get a lot of luck with that. And we build this list when speaking of language and teaching them how to critique, especially with my freshmen and sophomore, we start building this list of no words throughout the semester that basically tells them, you know, like, you can't say it's weird. The weird's not a descriptive word, you know, like it's not clear. We need to understand what you're talking about. So you have to start using design language and actually discussing the principles, like, why is it weird looking, you know? So they always seem to enjoy that. And then after a while, it's their class list. So they also get ownership of that there. And that's something we do online as well. And then halfway through the semester, they're like, oh, you said it's weird, you know? And so they start catching each other on it. So that starts teaching them, like, okay, to take good and bad and weird out of our vocabulary and start adding in those design terms and terminology and phrases that we want to say. So I've had a lot of good luck with that too.
Something in support of grades or not grades, something that I've done and something that my colleagues have done is that I have gotten the students involved one-on-one on the grading process. So I'll invite them in for a 10-minute consultation and we'll grade their project together. And it's a really fascinating thing for them they've got the rubric at the same time that they got the project sheet. So for them to actually go through the rubric with me and be able to speak to how they solved the problems or didn't solve the problems. And they're actually quite a bit more critical of their work in that way, in that they'll often give themselves a harsher grade than what I will give them, which I found really, really fascinating, is to be able to sit down and far more effective than just giving them a grade rubric. I only do that with the upper end, so like 3rd and 4th year students, so that they've really got that language behind them. And we've established a relationship between the two of us that we can have those conversations. Second thing that some of my colleagues have done, but I haven't had the opportunity to do, is that none of their work is graded until the very end. So the last week of school is spent with they give a half an hour portfolio review. So they look at their body of work that they've done the entire semester. And again, that critique and that grading process happens in a partnership with the student, so that they've had a chance to look at their body of work for the class instead of just grading individual pieces.
I have a question to raise. I think the conversation here is really good, but I have one thing that I find confused. For me, the ability to critique versus the ability to design, correct, is two different things for me. I like what Michael just raised, correct? I do a lot of live project in my class, which means that sometimes the student get critique from the client who are not designer. So when they say things to the students, they're saying why I do not like your design. They do not even use any design vocabulary. This is what our student is going to face in future. You're going to face their work, being selected by people that are not designers. So you're asking designers to critique each other. They quite often critique, how to make your project better, but not necessarily what the client wanted, correct? And then that is dangerous when you start, and I don't know how, this is one thing that I'm questioning. How do we make students better at critiquing, not better at designing, correct? I think when they know how to critique, they automatically learn how to be a better designer, not the other way around, I think. When they learn how to see problems, how to improve, from other people's work, because they eliminate their own self. You know how you do your own work, it's like a baby, right? You cannot see it in a practical sense. When you critique somebody else's work, it's much easier to see what's wrong, right? And you don't use your personal preference. I like yellow, so all my work is yellow, right? You cannot see any other solution. But when you look at other people's work, it can be more practical. So what I do my work, right, is let students know how to improve their critique, not how to learn how to be a better designer, which for me is two different forms of teaching. So I create this application called Online Critique Site, where students can rate each other, comment, critique, whether it works for them. So they learn how to give critique that help other people, not help themselves. And the other thing is to learn from a client critique. They start learning why their work, is not fitted to, the design thinking or, the empathy, what we are talking about, user experience. And those are very critical to learn from critique, not learning from design. Once you know how to critique, you automatically learn those skills that is making you a better designer. So I would like to learn how everyone is doing to improve critique skill. You literally have a way to use a rubric to grade critique, not rating their work. Rating the critique, and I'm always struggle because if students do verbal, I give them a, like a 3.5. They'll say, what do I do wrong? I can't remember like what they said last week, So my rubric only says something that is not critical to what they said. So I want to hear from what everyone is doing.
Well, I just want to, we've got 4 minutes left, and I put a note to ask some folks to raise hands. So I do have 4 people in the queue. I don't know who was first. So Ramon, we'll start with you. You had your hand raised.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Sure. So I was writing some stuff. You know, like I think part of it is like, and I articulated in one of the groups, is like, what do we mean by critique? Can we define that? And can we clarify that with our students? My whole thing is every time I hear the word critique, I hear some 1960s anvil coming back at me, and that does not necessarily work for our students. I mean, those horrifying art school critiques in the 60s, that's not what we're talking about. And I think it's really important to clarify and to acknowledge it with the students in our classes. And also I was just writing in terms of responding to your point. I think part of it also is we have to create nimble students. I mean, design vocabulary, problematic. Professional design vocabulary, problematic. There's a lot of things. So we just need to prepare students who are nimble, who can move back and forth. You know, like I can't teach students about hierarchy anymore. Like I can do it, but what do I mean? Like go back to the root of the word. It's about control. It's about controlling people. Grid's about control, right? Like, so we have to think about like, how do they go back and forth between different contexts? And how do they shift their vocabulary, their language? Because let's face it, a lot of clients are just not informed and will never engage in the discussion of their work the same way that you would do in an art class. So I think just some thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you. Elio?
Yeah, very quickly. First of all, I have never heard the word crit until today. Never. I've been here for 26 years, never. So that was very educational. What I do is I give them a rubric weeks before the project is due, the big projects, and then they grade themselves according to that rubric. So they give me the grade that they think that they deserve according to that rubric. And then I evaluate looking at what they have done. That makes them feel that they are understanding the criteria and then giving their own grade to themselves.
Thank you. And take a couple more here. Shasti?
So one of the things that came up in our second group was we decided to concentrate on just one question because we didn't get out of the first question in this first breakout group. And several of the things that came up were these questions of creating community and how important it is to try and create a sense of community within the classroom, because that trust is actually the thing that enables students to believe one another when they are offering critique of any kind, right? So these ideas of building community seem to be central to the notion of building trust, which in turn can build more effective dialogue. So the most difficult aspect of the online version of this process is that we don't have them all in the same room, and they're splintering, and they have such a hard time engaging with one another even in person. So trying to find ways to get them to engage with each other. I love the idea of breaking critiques into small groups, because Dina, that was a fantastic idea. But it seems like really integral to this process that we somehow put at the forefront of everything that we're doing a facilitation of them getting to know each other, trusting one another, listening to each other, because as Rick Griffith puts it so beautifully all the time, that design is about us. Design is about humans communicating. And so one of the most important things that we can do is get them to become each other's teams. And that was something that came up in our group, and I felt very passionately about that. Thank you for letting me talk.